our guest, Chuck Hayes, is doing the presentation, and he's going to pause every once in a while and let me interject with our questions. And if I have a question, I'll go ahead and ask him to do that. And one more reminder before we get going. My program is funded through the Department of Transportation, and all of my programs are subject to Freedom of Information Act requests. So please refrain from asking questions about specific cases or anything that's confidential. Please go ahead and keep that to yourself. And if you have questions that you want to ask either Chuck or myself offline afterward, of course, you're welcome to give us a call or email us and do so. All right, so those are the basics on webinars. Barb, if you could go ahead and start recording, we'll get going with the actual webinar. Chuck Hayes is with the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and he has unique insight on the changes that were made to the standardized field sobriety tests, and I will let Chuck introduce himself a little bit further and talk about how the process was done and what changes were made. And again, I remind everybody, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in over on the right-hand side of your screen. Chuck, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Erin, and I thank you all that are attending and listening in today. So it's a great opportunity, and I appreciate the opportunity to address the 2013 standardized field sobriety testing curriculum updates and kind of give you an idea as to how the updates took place. Also talk about some of those things that we did when we did the updates for the 2013 curriculum. And so this is a great opportunity because I'm hoping that some of you people that are out there listening in today are standardized field sobriety testing instructors, others may be practitioners. And so it's important for us to get this information out to everyone, and so this is a great opportunity to do that. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that. And as Erin said, if you've got any questions that come up, go ahead and type them in there. We'll do our best to try to answer those. And if for some reason I can't answer them today, we'll get that information back to you as soon as we can. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the slide program. And first of all, a little bit about my background is that I am retired from the Oregon State Police. And so one of my many duties with the Oregon State Police was the Impaired Driving Programs Coordinator, which included work as a standardized field sobriety testing instructor for a number of years. I was also a drug recognition expert, the first one in Oregon, and then became one of the original DRE instructors. And I've been instructing for over 20 years. When I retired from the Oregon State Police, I went to work as the Regional Operations Coordinator for the International Association of Chiefs of Police to help with the Drug Evaluation and Classification Program, which I still do today, and still in that capacity. So working with the International Association of Chiefs of Police, as Erin mentioned, I have had some unique experiences and the opportunities to be involved with the standardized field sobriety testing, and then also the Advanced Roadside Impaired Driving Enforcement, also known as ARIDE, and the DRE curriculum, working very closely with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. I also serve as a staff person for the IACP on the DRE Technical Advisory Panel, and that is the Curriculum Committee, which is one of the committees that is part of TAP, or part of the Technical Advisory Panel. So many of the revisions and some of the updates that have been done for not only SFST, ARIDE, and DRE, I have been involved in those for quite a number of years. So that kind of takes me back a ways, but it's having that experience and seeing these changes that have taken place, and as we continue to move forward on this. So I'll be talking about that just a little bit as well. All right. So what we hope to cover today, and we should be able to cover this, would be, number one, talking about the curriculum synchronization and how that took place and what that was all about. Also talking a little bit about the emphasis on the San Diego Standardized Field Sobriety Validation Study, which is very important to us as our latest validation study. I'm also going to address the walk and turn and the improper turn scoring procedure, because we have determined that there are some, I guess, a little bit of concern there that maybe some instructors and some officers may not be doing that exactly the way that the manual and the way it was developed, so we'll address that. And also talk about the one-leg stand instructions, try to clarify some things that have been going on with that test as well. I'll also spend a little time talking about the modified Romberg balance test and how that name came about, and how if you're teaching that as part of your curriculum or doing that test, some things that you probably need to know. We'll also address some of the SFST test limitations, because that probably is one of the most critical things right now that the defense seems to be attacking us on, is that some of the original research that was done by Dr. Burns and her colleagues dealing with people that are over certain ages or over certain weight, and so how we're trying to address that and some of the new material that we put into the 2013 curriculum. I'll also talk about standardized field sobriety testing certification, kind of clarify that as to how that is done and who does that and who does not do that. And then we'll spend a little time talking about the SFST refresher training, and then finish up by talking about the curriculum revision process, because I think it's all very important that all of you, especially you SFST instructors, are aware of how this process takes place and how you can also assist us in this area as we move forward with future revisions.
Chuck, I do have a question. Is the PowerPoint that you're going through, is that something that I'm able to share with everybody, or is that proprietary?
Nope, you can share it. In fact, we have given it out to a number of states already that have asked for it, and so anytime maybe if Montana is doing an SFST refresher training, you can go ahead and use this. So we're pleased that you would use it.
Okay, so just for everybody's information, if you're interested in getting a copy of this, please just send me an email at aaron@inmantraining.com, or you can send it to Barb, who you registered through. Thanks, Chuck.
Yes. All right, well, let's talk about the curriculum synchronization. As you can see from this slide, we have the DWI detection and standardized field sobriety testing manual right there in the middle with arrows going both directions pointing towards DRE and then also ARIDE. And so this synchronization project that NHTSA funded actually began about 3 years ago. And it took a little over 2 years to complete. And we knew it was going to be a major undertaking. It was going to kind of slow down the updates and the revisions, but it was something that really drastically needed to be done. And so what we're showing here, and what is important for you all to know, is that the SFST curriculum truly is the foundation. So it's the foundation to DRE, it's the foundation to ARIDE. And so the curriculum synchronization project that was actually hired out by NHTSA, they had outside contractors that did this. What they were asked to do, and it took a while, as I just mentioned, for them to do this, is that they wanted to make sure that all three of these curriculums were synchronized, so that if something was addressed in SFST, well, then it would also indicate the same thing for DRE if it was applicable, and the same thing if it was applicable to ARIDE. And so it's kind of like a stair-stepping process in a way. So anything that is really in DRE should also be in SFST and should also be in ARIDE if it is something that's applicable to that training, and then vice versa. So we wanted to make sure that with the curriculum synchronization, that things such as how to do the instructions for HGN, the scoring clues, the verbiage for the instructions, glossary of terms, definitions, facts and figures regarding impaired driving, all of those were the same in all three manuals, again, if they were applicable to each one of those curriculums. So that took a long time to do. We were hoping, and so was NHTSA, that it would be done in probably a year and a half or 2 years, but it actually took a little bit longer. But the good thing about this is now that we do have these three manuals all synchronized, now when it comes time to actually do a revision or update things, well, then we know exactly that if we make one change in one manual, well, then we can also make the same change in another manual as well. And so that took some time to do, but it was something that was really needed, and as I said earlier, it had never been done before. So this was something very unique and that we did with the curriculum process. All right, as far as the SFST curriculum for 2013, you will probably see, and if you have the manuals already, that the date indicates that it was May of 2013. And the reason for that is because that was when it was actually approved by the by NHTSA and also by the DRE Technical Advisory Panel. And so it was approved, and so the date of the curriculum is May of 2013. So I don't want you to be confused on that. But it was not actually released until September. So just about a year ago is when all of the materials were released to the states. And the reason that there was a delay in that was mainly because of printing of the CDs and the funding to make sure that we had the money to do that. And so it took a little bit longer to get the actual materials out to the states. So hopefully everyone has those, because NHTSA was in charge of the release, and so they sent the materials to the Governor's Highway Safety Office. So your Montana Governor's Highway Safety Office should have the materials, as should Aaron at the TSR as a TSRP, and then also your SFST state coordinator and your DRE state coordinator should have the CDs as well. And so we then ask the states, once you get those materials, then you determine how they're going to be then released out to your instructors and made available to other people as well. So one of the things that you probably noticed if you've seen the new materials, the 2013 curriculum, is that it's a new training format. And so this was something that, again, was proposed so that we could get away from the old style of manuals, make it a little bit easier. For those of you who maybe have been involved in this training for a number of years like me, well, you can probably remember the old 3-column format that was done with WordPerfect. Well, we've totally gone away from that. And so now the new format actually has the PowerPoint slide on the page, and so as the instructor is talking about that particular slide or the information that's in that slide or any information that relates to that slide, well, then they can actually see the PowerPoint slide on the page. And then as far as the participant manual, well, the slide is also there, and it also has an area next to the slide where the participants can take notes and follow along when they go through the basic training. So it's a little bit easier format to follow, and thus far we've had a lot of compliments on the new style, and we were a little concerned because some of the older instructors that have been around for a number of years, like myself, well, it was like, okay, we're changing from this old style going to this new format. How is that going to work? So not only did we do that for SFST, but we did it for A-RIDE, and we also did it for DRE as well. One of the things that's difficult to do and is always a challenge to us is trying to update the impaired driving data. And so one of the things that we do is we try to give the national data and try to keep that up to date as well as we can. But we also still encourage the states to use their own data too. So if any state and any instructor that is putting on an SFST school, we always highly recommend that you try to incorporate your own local state data that when it pertains to impaired driving, DUI arrests, traffic fatalities that involve alcohol and other drugs and those kind of things. So we still encourage that because there's just no way that we could do that in the capacity of looking at the national statistics. One of the things we've also done, and you'll probably notice this right away, is that we've updated 4 of the driving video scenarios and the driving cues and the driving indicators. And so we still have some work to do, and we plan on doing some more videos, but some of those that were a little bit confusing and may have not been all that clear, we've tried to improve upon those and make that a little easier so that it does follow along with the driving indicators and the vehicle in motion and those kind of other things as well. We also did an update to the Introduction to Drug Driving module, and so just remember that's the 4-hour module that is at the end of the course, even though for some reason in 2013 it was listed as and included as the first module, but it is one of those modules that as an SFST instructor you can teach this if you want. There are some states that have gone totally to teaching the version that is similar to the old 8-hour drugs and impaired driving. And so we give you this 4-hour introduction to drug driving module in case you want to teach that, which is kind of the very first step in the drug driving detection and training modules as well. I'll pause there just for a minute in case Erin has any questions.
Not so far, Chuck. I do want to just clarify that if a law enforcement officer has not been trained on any of these revisions yet, haven't been to a refresher, or let's say they're going to court on a DUI that occurred prior to this, those law enforcement officers are still testifying with regard to what was contained in the manual that they were trained under. Does that sound right, Chuck?
Yes, and that's really important, because we're finding that to be the case in a lot of areas around the country, is that the officers may have been trained with the 2006 SFST curriculum, and they may not be aware of what's in the 2013. And so I think it's important that if officers can, agencies can, that you try to get hold of the 2013 SFST participant manual. And so if those haven't already, they will be made available on sobrietytesting.org. And so NHTSA is going to put these on there. And so that might be one resource that you could do, but also there are others that are available to try to get a copy of the manual. So you should always try to talk about, okay, well, I was trained using the 2006 version, but also be aware that maybe there have been some updates that have occurred, and that's why it's important, I think, that we talk about these updates today.
Thanks, Chuck.
Okay. All right. Moving ahead, again, when we looked at the curriculum and we started doing our updates, one of the things that we made sure that we did not do, and I do not see this happening in future revisions and updates as well, is that we're not going to remove the old original standardized field sobriety testing studies. So as you can see from the original studies, the first one done in June of 1977, and then the second one in 1981, and then so on in 1983, these original studies that were actually done and paid for by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration that involved Dr. Marceline Burns, we really consider these as the foundational studies. So if you're in court and you're asked about these, well, you should know a little bit about them and understand that these were truly the foundational studies as we then continued to build the studies and then continue to work on research in the future. And so they're important to know because this is where we get some of our original research. And so probably the biggest thing, there's two large things or major things out of these studies that we have to be aware of. And so that original percentages of reliability for horizontal gaze nystagmus, which was 77% according to these studies, and then the walk and turn, which is 68% reliability, and then the one-leg stand at 65%. Well, you need to know that those three areas, or those three percentages, came from the original foundational studies. And then also we need to know, because Dr. Burns, and there are times we wish that she wouldn't have done this, but she did do this, and so we can't go back and change it. But this is where the original information is, that talks about someone that is over the age of 60 or over 50 pounds overweight, and that they may have difficulty performing such tests such as the walk and turn and the one-leg stand. So that information is in these original studies, and so it's something that we have to be aware of. So when we look at the validation studies and look at what we're doing, I guess some of the information that I just talked about, well, really the new information that we added was in session 8. And so probably everybody knows that in session 8, that's kind of the core of the curriculum. And so that's what we spend a lot of our time talking about. So I think I might have skipped a slide, so I'm going to go back here. Nope, okay, we're good. The information that is talks about the correct and the incorrect arrest decisions, and so based upon the percentages of the tests for the HGN and walk and turn and one leg stand. So one of the things that we tried to do is we built in a chart, And so there's kind of a decision chart or decision matrix now that has been added to Session 8. And so we wanted to try to clarify that the best we could. So by adding that chart, we think we may have done that. And it also describes the methodology of the studies. And so this is going back again to those original research studies. And so trying to indicate the arrest versus the non-arrest decisions and how they were determined. And so that is helpful for us when we look at that. And so that is something, again, that is part of that original research and something that, again, prosecutors may ask you about, and definitely the defense may ask you about as well. All right, then the next studies here, and this is the one I tried to jump ahead of, but the Colorado studies, the study that was done in 1995 and the Florida study done in 1997, and then the San Diego study from 1998. Well, these are the validation studies now that we kind of look at and we kind of really are hanging our hat on because they're the most recent studies, and compared to the original Southern California Research Institute studies, well, we've got some better numbers here. And so even though, you know, they may not be the original foundational studies, but there are something, again, that we want officers and definitely SFST instructors to talk about and be aware of. So the Colorado study, when you look at that arrest versus release or the arrest versus no arrest decisions, well, that was at 86% is what they determined. Well, okay, so that may not seem as high, but what people have to realize is that the Colorado study was done with officers that had just been trained in the standardized field sobriety testing, and so they were new to this, and also they were dealing with a lot of other conditions. This was truly one of those tests or one of these research studies that was done in some adverse weather conditions, much like what you guys would be going through there in Montana as well. And so as a result of that, then the Southern California Research Institute, working with NHTSA again, then they did the Florida study, which was done in 1990, published in 1997. And the numbers were much better there. So with that group of officers, in fact, a lot of those officers that were involved in that research were drug recognition expert officers from the Tampa area, and so they had ideal weather conditions. They had officers that were very familiar with the standardized field sobriety testing, and so their arrest versus non-arrest decisions and making the correct arrest decisions was at 95%, so much higher than what we saw with Colorado. So as a result of that, though, then what the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration determined, because all states were moving to a .08, and even some states were looking at lowering that and even going as maybe as low as .05 for blood alcohol levels for DUI arrests. Well, then they said, okay, we need to actually do another study, and so San Diego was the one that was picked. And so with the San Diego study, where we saw some really improved numbers, and so that now is why we're really trying to, when we do this training, and you as officers should really be aware of what we saw and what the results were for San Diego. And as you can see right here from the San Diego SFST validation study, there's the name of it there, the validation of the standardized field sobriety test at BAC below 0.10%. It was, again, a 1998 field study that was NHTSA sponsored. Southern California Research Institute was involved in it, as was a local California research facility as well. They used officers that were proficient in the standardized field sobriety tests. In fact, it was the San Diego Police Department DUI team that was involved in this. And so as a result of this, and using the 3-test battery and making the determinations as to whether or not they were going to arrest people or release people based upon those 3 standardized field sobriety tests, well, the arrest decision was much higher, and it was also what was more important to us is, as you'll see, is that our percentages of reliability for HGN and walk and turn and one-leg stand were higher as well. So you'll see here on this slide is that from the San Diego SFST accuracy, they determined that HGN alone, used by itself, was 88% reliable in detecting a person that was under the influence at least a 0.08%. And so, again, that was higher than what we saw with the original HGN research that was done by SCRI back when they were looking at a 0.10%. And so this is 88% compared to 77%. And then what was interesting from the San Diego study is that the one-leg stand actually came out higher than the walk and turn, as you can see. So with one-leg stand being 83% accurate by itself, and then the walk and turn test at 79% by itself as well. So one of the first questions we get asked, and we've been asked this a lot, and is that, well, we were always taught that you do HGN first, then you do walk and turn second, and you do the one-leg stand third, just because of the original research that was done by the Southern California Research Institute. Well, we're still recommending that. There's no reason why officers should go back now and change the order in which they do these tests, because if you were originally trained to do it, HGN, walk and turn, one-leg stand, as I was, and as we've continued to teach today, there's really no reason to go back and change it. We just really highly recommend that the very first test that you do at roadside always be the horizontal gaze nystagmus, because that is the most accurate and the most highest the probability at determining someone that's under the influence of alcohol 0.08 or greater. So no changes are recommended there. We would like to just see you continue with HGN, walk and turn, and one-leg stand. One of the things that we are doing and kind of correcting this for the next revision, if you look in the glossary of terms for the SFST manual, you will see that we have each one of these tests defined in the definitions, and walk and turn said it is the second test done in the SFST battery. And for one-leg stand, it says it is the third test done in the SFST battery. Well, we are removing that second and third reference so that it just says now that it is one of the tests administered during the standardized field sobriety testing battery, because we don't want to really paint ourselves into a corner, so to speak, that we have to give that walk and turn second or the one-leg stand third, because there may be times, as we all know, that we may have to do them a little bit out of order. So that's kind of the important thing right there. That's why the San Diego study is one that we are really highly emphasizing now when we do the training. Several reasons, again, just to kind of recap that, is that number one, I mean, it was done in 1998, and so it's our most recent of the research validation studies that we've done. And then also because of these higher probability rates when we look at these. So it's important for us to really emphasize this when we do our training. And then it was really kind of the very first of the research studies that successfully evaluated the accuracy of the SFST battery, identifying BAC levels below 0.10. And so they identified that the validity of the SFSTs for both 0.08 and also for 0.10. But one of the things that study did, if you read in it and you read over it well, you will see that it also was helpful in identifying those blood alcohol levels maybe at a 0.04, 05 in that area. And so for many years we've always said that once you see two clues of nystagmus, and so that lack of smooth pursuit, and then you see distinct and sustained nystagmus, that maximum deviation, well, we've said, and believed for a long time because of the research, that that is usually a good indicator of a blood alcohol level at around a 0.04, 0.05. Well, the San Diego study validated that for us, because that's what they actually saw in those lower blood alcohol levels. And so 4 clues now indicates that it could be a blood alcohol level at a 0.04, 0.05 in that area. So the San Diego study helped with that as well and helped clarify that for us. I will pause just to see if any questions from Erin.
Well, I did want to point out that what you said earlier is pretty relevant. The San Diego study just removed a lot of the variables from the Colorado study so that we have a more accurate understanding of how good these tests are. whereas in Colorado we had all sorts of other factors. In any good study, scientifically, you want to remove as many variables as possible. So it's not just that we're picking the study that looks best for us, we're picking the study that was the best study.
And that's a great way of approaching it, because I would hope that your prosecutors in Montana and prosecutors throughout the country, if this research comes up, well, obviously the defense is going to probably try to stay with the original foundational studies, because those are the oldest and the numbers aren't as well for us. And so, okay, we're going to talk about those, but I'm hoping the prosecutors and the officers would be prepared to talk about the San Diego study as well, and talking about the results of that study.
I hope so.
Yes. All right, moving along. So the important conclusions really emphasized from the 2013 SFST curriculum related to the San Diego study included that the HDN test was found to be the most predictable of the 3 tests. And so that did not change. We didn't expect that to change, but this just reinforced that. And then also the data indicated that the HDN test alone could provide valid indications or indicators to support the officer's arrest decisions at both 0.08 but also at 0.04%. And so I think that's important as well, because as we think about the drug driving situation and what's going on with that around the country, and also there in Montana, well, again, the combined alcohol with other drugs, and so we're going to be able to actually testify to this and use this now because of the support that we get from the San Diego study, where we know that we're going to see some indicators of HGN even as low as a 0.04 blood alcohol level. So I think the San Diego study can be very helpful, because when states around the country look at, and we did have some recent conversation about that going on around the country, of lowering the blood alcohol level rates from 0.08 maybe all the way down to 0.05. Well, we have a validation study that supports that we can actually detect that. So that's helpful as well. And then the SFSTs accurately discriminated above or below a 0.04 blood alcohol level. And so that's important for us, again, as we maybe look at those lower blood alcohol levels, but yet are seeing indicators of impairment at roadside.
Just a reminder for everybody in Montana, sorry, Chuck, our 618401 violation, they do not have to be above a 0.08 in order to arrest or even convict somebody at that level. There are several jurisdictions where the officers have done a very good job at investigating and documenting the person being under the influence, and the prosecutor was ultimately able to prove an individual somewhere between an 04 and an 08 who was under the influence. So they were able to effectively argue that in front of a jury and get a conviction because the officer did a good job. So just a reminder, please don't ignore the idea that below an 08 is significant.
Very good. Thank you. All right, so just to kind of further emphasize this, so everyone who's listening in today, and those that are not here, that you that are listening in have an opportunity to talk about this, really we do want to emphasize the importance of the San Diego validation study. We are emphasizing that not only with our officers, but also with the prosecutors, TSRPs around the country, because it really is important, and we need to spend a little bit more time when we train officers talking about the San Diego study. And so I'll also recommend this to you as well. Unlike the original manuals that were done, or research, documents that were done by SCRI that are huge in size, the San Diego study, you can go and download that off of the internet, and it's a small document, easy reading, and something maybe that every officer should have, and especially every SFST instructor should have, so that you can actually be able to digest that a little bit more. So I'd recommend that if you could do that. All right, let's talk about arresting nystagmus. We're going to talk about some of the things now, some of the changes that occurred. But we did add some new information about whether or not, let's say an officer at roadside now encounters somebody that is that is demonstrating resting nystagmus. Does it mean that as soon as I see resting nystagmus that I should just stop and not continue with the test, or can I go ahead and continue with the test? And so we have clarified that in the 2013 curriculum, and we are saying now that just because you see resting nystagmus, you should go ahead and continue on with the HGN test and don't stop. And the reason for that is because by doing the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, even though resting nystagmus was observed, you may see different responses from one eye to the other. And so they should still track together as the eyes move to side, even though resting nystagmus was observed. But if they don't, and you don't have them tracking together, well, then that would be a very good indicator of a possible medical impairment or something that is going on medically with that person. So there have been some officers around the country that have been led to believe that because I see resting nystagmus, that I should stop the test and not continue on. But we are encouraging and trying to emphasize that and clarify that in the manuals that you should go ahead and continue to do that. So hopefully this will kind of help out. And so there in the instructor guide, we've added an instructor note to that, and then it's also indicated in the participant manual as well that you can go ahead and continue the test. The lack of smooth pursuit, one of the things that we did there is we removed that old analogy of a marble rolling across a polished pane of glass, and so that has been around for, I don't know, probably 20 plus years it seems like, maybe when the manuals were first produced. And so what we did is we kind of used the analogy which we think is better and more people can understand, and an officer can use this analogy in the courtroom, and the jurors probably are going to understand it better. And that is using the analogy of a windshield wipers moving across a dry windshield. So when you think about that, when you turn on your windshield wipers on a dry windshield, they're going to jump and hop as they go across and moving together, but yet it's going to be very ragged as it goes across because of the dry windshield. And so that would be one analogy of trying to describe that lack of smooth pursuit. And so when smooth pursuit is there, well, it would be like the windshield that is wet, like we experience here in Oregon. Well, then those windshield wipers are going to go across there fairly smoothly, and there shouldn't be any disruption as they move from side to side. So hopefully that will give a better analogy that people can understand, and so we would always recommend and suggest if an officer get a chance to use that type of analogy that you use that one, unless you have one that's better that maybe we're not just aware of.
Yeah, and if I understand correctly, Chuck, there were defense attorneys who were bringing into the courtroom sandpaper and rolling a marble on sandpaper, and
we heard about that. Yes.
Yeah.
We heard those stories.
So thank you for that.
Let them try to bring in a windshield wiper now and try that one, okay? But I think it's going to kind of clarify that. And and the important thing too is that our experts around the country, Dr. Carl Siddick and Dr. Jack Richmond and folks like that, this is how they testify. They use this analogy of the windshield wipers, and so I think people can understand it, judges can understand it, jurors can understand it much better, hopefully. All right, here's one that we'll spend a little time talking about, and this is the improper turn scoring clarification. So the question is that if I had somebody that was doing the walk and turn test, and for some reason, when they were going down that line and they were touching heel to toe, as they were told to do, but when they got to the end of the line or got to that portion of the test where they decided to make the turn, and if they were to turn on their right foot instead of their left foot, but yet they did the turn correctly by taking a series of small steps, reversing their direction, and then coming back down the line again, well, officers were interpreting that as to be an improper turn because the turn was made on the right foot instead of the left. And that is not the case. And so we needed to clarify that after we heard some of the discussion going on around the country, and that there's some confusion that existed on that. So when you think about that, if that suspect takes 8 steps and then turns on the right, and that right foot is essentially their turning foot or their foot that is planted to the ground, or we'll use this word just for today, but that maybe is their pivot foot, but yet they make the turn correctly. Well, how did they get to that position? They got to that position by taking an incorrect or improper number of steps. And so that incorrect number of steps would actually be the clue. And so what we were finding out is that some instructors and some officers were actually giving them 2 clues for the same error. And so it was an improper number of steps or incorrect number of steps, and then it was also an improper turn. And so we tried to clarify this. And so, again, if you have somebody at a roadside that turns on the right foot instead of the left, and the test is done correctly, or that maneuver is done correctly, they don't lose their balance, don't go off the line, don't do an about-face swivel or pivot or something like that, well, then you would only score them for an incorrect number of steps and not an improper turn. So I'm hoping that everyone understands that. And so one of the things too that came up, and so that added, I guess, to the confusion, and so we have clarified that in the 2013 curriculum as well, is we used to have the words in there as demonstrated. And so an officer would say, well, I demonstrated it by them turning on the left foot. And so that suspect did not turn on the left foot as I demonstrated, so therefore I'm going to count that as a clue because they didn't do it as demonstrated. Well, we went back to the original research on that, and so I spent some time not only talking to Dr. Marceline Burns, but Jack Oates at NHTSA, who developed this curriculum, and then some other people, including the head research person from the San Diego study. And I asked that question, okay, if you had somebody that turned on the right foot instead of the left, but yet did everything correct as you asked them to do and they were supposed to do by taking a series of small steps and reversing their direction, was that counted as a clue? And all of them said that it was not. And so again, they referred me back saying, okay, that would be an incorrect number of steps instead of the improper turn. So we're trying to clarify that. And so here's the fear that we've had from some SFST instructors that have been out there maybe doing this for a number of years that say, well, I've been teaching that, and apparently I've been teaching it incorrect through the years. Well, it's like, okay, we can't go back and fix that, but we could just make sure that maybe through SFST in-service training or future SFST training, or maybe as we train future SFST instructors, that we just make sure that they understand this and are doing it correctly.
And in the meantime, I guess, Jack, if somebody is, we have a lot of DREs who review tapes and are asked to come in as experts to testify in somebody else's case. And an instructor, if they're in that situation, can just clarify and say, no, that clue wouldn't actually count, or yes, that was an improper turn, and it shouldn't be a big, fat, hairy deal.
I don't think so. I think that it's something that we can get around, and we will, and so I think it's just more so of the clarification. So that's kind of why I have this next slide here, is because we went back to the original DWI training manual that was produced in 1979, and so I can actually remember this manual. I saw this manual early on in some of my training, but the original manual that was done by the Southern California Research Institute, and you can see the page there of that manual, it says make your turn by keeping 1 foot on the line. Okay, so that's what it's saying, and so it does not say make your turn by keeping your left foot on the line or your right foot. It says by keeping 1 foot on the line. And so I think we can use that if we need to, and also kind of justifies that making this correction or clarification in the manual. And so just through the years, I think more so than anything, it might have been that wording that we had in there that we did remove, which said as demonstrated. And so we just got to get away from that type of thinking, because we're demonstrating it a certain way, and hopefully we're giving them the correct instructions. But your instructions as an officer should not be, when you get to the end of the line, leave your left foot on the line and take a series of small steps. It should be leave your lead foot on the line or your front foot on the line and take a series of small steps. Those are the proper instructions that have been with us for years and years and years. Okay, so kind of continuing along with this theme here, this is what we have added to the instructor guide, and so this is also will be in the participant manual as well. And it just basically says that, as you can read here, that there may be times when the suspect takes a turn in the wrong direction, begins the heel-to-toe walk on the wrong foot, and ends up turning on the right foot instead of the left. And so we just have kind of explained this. And then we followed it up by saying that this is also is consistent with the original research done by the Southern California Research Institute, and also with the scoring of the walk and turn test from the San Diego Field Validation Study. So we're really hoping that this will clarify things and maybe get everyone more consistent as how they do this. Moving along to the one-leg stand instructions, and this was an error that I have to bring to your attention. So if you do have the 2013 participant manual in session 8, well, you're going to see that there's a PowerPoint slide in there that still says regarding how the raised foot is to be held during the balance and counting stage. And so the proper instructions and what we tried to clarify, but we missed that PowerPoint slide for some reason, was the proper instruction should be with your raised foot parallel to the ground. And so somehow, some way through the years, it got added that point your toe forward or point your toe out or just point your toe was one of the instructions. And so again, going back to the original research that was done by the Southern California Research Institute, also going back to the research and validation that was done in San Diego, well, this was not meant to be one of those instructions. And so the test subject is directed to stand with their feet together, heels together, arms at their side. They're asked to raise one foot approximately 6 inches off the ground, and also by keeping both legs straight. But there's no instruction that should be given to the suspect to point their toe forward or point their toe out. And I think what has happened through the years is that some instructors have felt like, you know what, if I can have them point that toe forward, well, it's easier for me to be able to see whether or not how they're doing as far as approximately 6 inches off the ground. But what the defense has raised with this is that now we're asking them to do something that is above and beyond, something simple as pointing your toe forward instead of parallel to the ground, and so it's added to the divided attention or added a little extra to the test that it went above and beyond the Southern California Research Institute and also the San Diego study. So that's why we're trying to clarify that and making sure that officers don't give those instructions about pointing the toe forward or pointing the toe out.
They do give the instruction then to keep their foot parallel to the ground, but not to point. That's what you said,
yes, right? That is what that's the clarification, and that's the proper way that it's supposed to be done.
Okay, and both legs are supposed to be straight. So for some people it will feel like pointing, but we don't want to tell them to point because for others it won't
Correct.
actually be pointing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've heard a number of arguments on this from defense, but by pointing the toe forward, not only is it causing them to divide attention even more, do something that's beyond and above and beyond the test, but it's also, they're saying, well, it could be uncomfortable for the person, you know, because now they're having to point that toe forward out, and so, you know, we've heard many different arguments. And so we're just trying to make sure that we can address those and then get back again to that original research that didn't have that in there. That instruction was never part of it. And so we're trying to clarify that and hope that that does with this clarification. All right, getting on to some easier things. Romberg balance, and so we've all heard about the original Romberg balance, so DREs are trained on this. It's also mentioned in A-RIDE. But it's now becoming, as we're seeing, kind of more part of the standardized field sobriety tests, as well as officers that know about this and have gone through A-RIDE training maybe are incorporating some of the Romberg balance testing at roadside. And so basically what that modified Romberg balance test is with somebody standing with their heels together, arms to their side, and they're asked to tilt their head backwards slightly, close their eyes, and then it's an estimation of approximately 30 seconds. And so if this is being done, officers are using it, and so that's why we're making sure that we have mentioned it in the standardized field sobriety curriculum for 2013. is that, okay, it's the modified Romberg balance. It is not the original Romberg balance test that Dr. Romberg actually kind of came up with a little over 100 years ago. And so that original Romberg balance test is really nothing similar to what we would do at roadside when we're looking for somebody that may be showing signs and clues of impairment. Because his was not a timing device, it was not an inner timing device where they're estimating 30 seconds or anything like that. They held their hands out in front of them or out to the side, and we don't ask them to do that. So it is truly a modified version of the Romberg balance test, so it has been renamed in all of the curriculums, the modified Romberg balance test. And the defense many times likes to get officers on the stand and then start talking about the Romberg balance test and then trying to actually deflect that, and so we have renamed it to the modified Romberg balance test to be consistent with ARIDE and DRE. And then also, as you can see from that second bullet there, there's no H in Romberg, and so we've seen that spelled that way many times, and it is an incorrect spelling. So just as, you know, something as if the officers are using it at roadside and put it in their field notes and in their reports. All right, this limitations, this was a biggie and continues to be kind of a thorn in our side, but we're working on it. Slowly but surely we're working on it, because we are right now collecting data from DREs where they're doing evaluations on non-impaired people that are over the age of 60, 65, persons 50 pounds or more overweight. And so really trying to determine, okay, how do these people, and are they able to do the walk and turn and the one-leg stand test and those kind of things. But unfortunately, when Marcy Burns and the Southern California Research Institute did their original foundational studies, they didn't really have anybody or a large percentage of people that fit this criteria. So she had to make this statement. She felt like she was compelled to make this statement that, okay, we've got 1 or 2 people in here that are actually fit this criteria, and they did experience some problems with doing the walk and turn test or the one-leg stand, and hey, these people were over the age of 60, 65, and that they appeared to be 50 pounds or more overweight. So this is one thing that the defense, we hear the most, I think, of any of the defense arguments around the country, is that when it comes time for trial, and if their client happens to be 60, 65 or over, or the possibility of 50 pounds or more, well, then they're going to bring this up. They're going to bring this up, well, isn't it true, officer, that the walk and turn and the one-leg stand test really are not applicable to my client? And it's not true, because the limitations were based upon the original research, and then the other research that was conducted in Colorado and Florida and San Diego, no problems there with people that were over the age of 60, 65, and 50 pounds or overweight. And we really then looked at the original research and found that it was less than 2%. In actuality, 1.5% of the study people that Dr. Burns used in her laboratory studies fit the criteria of being over the age of 60, 65, and 50 pounds or more. So it's a very, very small percentage. And so what we have done is we have added some information not only in as an instructor note, but also in the participant manual about that, so that the officers are aware of that. And when you even break it down even further and read the original studies that were done by Dr. Burns, there's no mention on the weight for the test subjects. And so Dr. Burns said, you know what, I didn't have anybody in there that I thought was very obese and you know, fit that criteria, so you know, I really wasn't all that concerned about it. But what we're saying is that officers should consider all of the factors when they actually do these and conduct these SFSTs at roadside. So if I've got somebody that is 65 years of age or older, somebody that appears to be overweight by 50 pounds or more, or if they're wearing heels that are more than 2 inches high, well, then we're going to take that into consideration, and so we're going to allow them, and we do allow them, to remove their heels if they want to for the walk and turn and one-leg stand. But we're also going to ask them questions about their age. We're going to ask them questions, you know, if they appear to be somewhat overweight and may have some problems with the balance and coordination. So we're just asking officers to understand that the limitations are still there until we can fix that with further research, and also that they consider all of those factors when they're making their determinations at roadside. Any comments on that one, Karen?
Well, I think this is really, it just goes back to the totality of the circumstances like your last bullet point says, and this is what we've been arguing for years. We still do these when they're safe if a person is over 65 or more than 50 pounds overweight. Clearly, if someone is going to blow a knee out, we don't want to hurt them. But as long as it looks like everybody's safely able to do these tests, we encourage officers to conduct the tests, and then we just consider it as part of the whole package when we're arguing or determining whether or not to arrest the person.
Exactly. And it really is no different when you think about it. So we do this all the time anyway, because if you're at roadside, an officer, and you're doing a field sobriety test, and it's the dead of winter in Montana, or it's raining sideways here in Oregon on the Oregon coast, well, we take all of those things into consideration anyway. So you're factoring in that as well, because how many times have we had to do SFSTs at roadside when the weather conditions have been, less than miserable, and so the testing surface might not be good. We could be on gravel instead of actually pavement, and so it's, again, we're just asking officers to kind of factor in all of those situations and all of those things, but to be ready for this type of defense argument because it's happening all over the country. And so it's the age thing, but you know what? We know there's a lot of people that are age 65 or more out there that are very capable of doing these tests. And the 50 pounds or overweight, well, okay, we live in a society now that is, I think, carrying a little bit more weight than maybe what they used to 20, 30 years ago. And who knows? I wouldn't put it past some defense attorneys to tell their clients, it's like we're getting ready to go to trial. Can you eat a little heavier here for the next month or two as we prepare for this, so that people can see that you're overweight when you get into the courtroom. So, but we're going to try to figure out ways that we can actually maybe do some research in this area so that we could have a valid published study on people that are non-impaired that maybe fit this criteria, these two criterias, to show that they can do the roadside test and can do the psychophysical test. So that's our goal in the future. But I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that we've added this information, and that second bullet is really the key here, because if some defense attorney starts arguing this point, well, then you can go to the research, or they can go to the research themselves and say, hey, it was less than 2% of the people in that study actually fell into this area. So we're talking a very, very small percentage of people. All right. SFST certification, I wanted to address this, and so this was a new note that was added to the Administrator's Guide of the SFST manuals. And speaking of the Administrator's Guide for you SFST instructors, if you haven't read that Administrator's Guide, you really need to do that, and it doesn't hurt for also the students to go through that as well. But one of the things that we've tried to clarify in there is SFST certification. So NHTSA and the IACP are not certifying agencies. We do not certify people as SFST instructors. We do not certify them in the standardized field sobriety testing. And so that applies both to the practitioners, that would be the students going through, and the instructors. And so we have heard of officers that go into court and say, well, I'm certified in the standardized field sobriety testing. I'm certified by NHTSA, or maybe I'm certified by the IACP. So it just goes back to also the same thing for DRE. We don't certify DREs at NHTSA or at the IACP, but we do credential DREs at the IACP. And so any certification that is done, and if an officer is going to use that terminology or use that word that I am certified or I've been certified in the SFST, well, then that has to be done through the state. And so if Montana has a process in place where they are certifying people in the standardized field sobriety tests, okay, then that's Montana that can do that, and so the officer would have to make that clarification, be ready for that clarification should he or she be asked on the witness stand. And so just remember that NHTSA and IACP do not certify anybody in these areas. And what's interesting is we've actually got defense attorneys around the country, and defense experts more so, I think, than the attorneys, that in their resumes or in their CVs are actually saying that they are certified in the standardized field sobriety tests. And so we are encouraging any prosecutor out there that if somebody comes in and they're a defense expert and they're claiming that, well, it's like, okay, who certified you? Because there are no national certification bodies out there. So I think that's just something to remember for everybody, not only for the officers, but also for those people who try to come in and use that to their credit, maybe on the defense side.
And Chuck, in Montana, we don't have an official certification process right now. Theoretically, somebody could come in who was trained in another state, and we don't know what the quality of it was, but they could come in and claim to be an SFST instructor here, and there's nothing that says that they aren't. As long as they've had the course to become an SFST instructor, then they can train here. We don't have anything that necessarily certifies or decertifies or anything like that for SFST instructors, let alone SFST practitioners. We do have a certificate to become a breath test operator, and that is that 40-hour week. We call it SFST week, but that is just to be able to operate our intoxilizer. So, just.
And I think that's pretty similar to what's going on around the country, because most of the states, they do not certify, and so they're not handing out certificates. Now there are some instructors maybe that go through an instructor development course around the country that you might be getting a certification there. But we're trying to stay away from that word certify, certification, those things, because again, that can just cause some problems. So what we're telling people is that you have been trained and you participated in the NHTSA IACP approved standardized field sobriety testing curriculum. So that's probably the best way of going about it, trying to maybe address it from that way instead of using that word certified or certification.
I have a question here. Let me see if I can open it.
Okay.
Scott. You know, it's going to take me a little bit to figure out. I don't know why I can't open it.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and go on, and I'll figure out how to open Scott's question.
Okay, very good. All right, SFST refresher training. So this is something, again, that we have just updated as well. So it was updated in 2013, but it's just now going through the next update and revision. And so one of the things that we've done is we've added an instructor note to the administrator's guide about the SFST training, refresher training. And so there are some states around the country now that the defense is trying to attack officers by the fact that it's like, okay, aren't you supposed to go through SFST refresher training as part of your officer training and the things that you do within your law enforcement capacity? And so what we have clarified here is that saying it is recommended that the states and local agencies use the SFST refresher as needed to ensure that the SFST trained personnel maintain their proficiency in the administration of the SFSTs. And so nowhere have we ever mandated, nor is it mandated by NHTSA, nor is it mandated by the IACP or the Technical Advisory Panel, that officers must go through SFST refresher training. We again are leaving that up to the states. We encourage it, as you can see, and it's recommended, but again, we just know that not all states are able to do that. So we tried to clarify that the best we could and added that to the administrator's guide.
And just so that everybody here knows, it's been tossed around at a state level whether or not we want to ask Post to require, to some degree, refresher trainings, whether it's once a year or once every 3 years. That has not occurred yet. So here in Montana, a person can still be trained at the Law Enforcement Academy and go 20 years without having to be refreshed on SFSTs. Again, just like Chuck says, it's not what we recommend. We recommend annually, or at least every 3 years. And Chuck, I do have Scott's question. Oh, okay. And he actually has a comment. He was saying that if you are a law enforcement officer in Montana and you want to train SFSTs in Montana, in order for your students to get post-credit, they do have to have an instructor certificate, because we
Okay.
do have a requirement in Montana that law enforcement officers be certified as instructors, go through a 40-hour course before their students can get post-credit. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, that's a good point, Scott, because I think that's pretty much the criteria that is being looked at around the country. And the reason for that is because not only, I mean, do we recommend that all SFST instructors have gone through some sort of instructor development course, but it is important that they be able to show something should they be asked or it come up in court. It's like, okay, who trained you? Is this person that trained you, are they actually an SFST instructor? So we're hoping that Montana and other states maintain a database on who their instructors are, and we strongly recommend that those instructors come back through some refresher training every once in a while, especially as we update the curriculum. So something that Montana might want to consider for 2015 is looking at maybe a course that you could do there as a refresher for the instructors, because as you'll hear from me here in just in a minute or two, the next curriculum update is coming up in 2015. So as far as the revision process, this is what happens. It's, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration appoints a curriculum revision work group, and they get input from us at the IACP. We also have representatives on that work group that are from the DRE Technical Advisory Panel from the Curriculum Committee. There are 7 of us from around the country that are on that curriculum committee, and then we're also seeking other people that are maybe subject matter experts that can come in and help us with this as well. So in 2013 we met twice. We've already met once this year. We just had a conference call yesterday that we're working on as far as the next round of revisions. And so what happens is once those revisions are made, well, then they are then reviewed by the entire curriculum committee, and then those revisions are discussed and approved at the annual technical, oops, I'm sorry about that, not sure if that came up, at the annual TAP meeting, and then those final recommendations are approved by TAP and then the IACP Highway Safety Committee. So as you can see, it's got a number of processes that it goes through. And then once that is approved, as we did for the 2013 curriculum, well, then we do pilot tests. And so we look for states early in the year, once the new curriculum comes out, that maybe would be interested in pilot testing the new curriculum for us. So as we look forward to 2015, we're identifying a couple of DRE schools that are coming up. We're also identifying a couple of states that may be interested in doing an SFST pilot for us, where we can actually take that new curriculum and see if we need to kind of, you know, smooth it out, remove any bugs in it or anything like that, make any corrections that may be necessary to do. And so after those pilot tests, well, then again, we take a look at the entire curriculum and decide whether or not if there's any changes that need to be made. So a little bit about the SFST curriculum history. This shows you what has gone on through the years, and I'm dating myself here, but I go back to some of these original manuals as well. So that original NHTSA manual was actually done as you can see, produced in 1987. The first training manual, as you heard me say earlier in this, was actually done in 1979, which was produced by the Southern California Research Institute. So what NHTSA did is they took that manual, and with the help of some researchers and people at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they developed this first original NHTSA manual that was produced in '87. And so the curriculum revisions process has really kind of remained the same. So what I just described to you has been happening since 1989, when the next manual revision came out. So as you can see, we've got about 10 different revisions, and I don't know if that's popping up on the screen. If it is, I apologize for that. But in 1989, 92, and then the latest revision being, as we said, the one that came out in May of 2013. And so we are already working on the next revision update, and so future curriculum issues that we're looking at, we're going to update the introduction to drug driving, move that to the last module, because that is a module, again, that is an SFST instructor. You can use that module. It's not something that's required to be part of the SFST. We're working at updating and kind of simplifying and revising the glossary of terms with the correct SFST version, because the one that came out in the 2013 came out by mistake and had a lot more information really than what we really need for SFST. And then always working at updating the impaired driving data facts and some of the information there. And then the next session, session 3, that's the one that really you will notice some changes coming up when we do that as well, because we're trying to make that more localized to the state. And so we've removed a lot of some of those old cases in there related to HGN and the standardized field sobriety testing, and to try to make that more state specific. And so Aaron, this is where you will probably be asked to maybe give some input and assist with that. And so we want officers in Montana really understanding and being familiar with Montana case law instead of looking at some of these other cases that are from all over the country that really may not have any relevance at all to what is going on in Montana. So we're giving the option there to do more of the localized case information cases from the local states. One of the things that we removed, and this was an error that we noticed, is that they're removing the instruction to require 2 complete passes when checking for equal tracking. And so we never meant that to go in there, but it made it somehow through the synchronization process. And so we're clarifying that for equal tracking, you don't have to do 2 complete passes. It's not a requirement. And then also adding those clarifications regarding the one-leg stand, and then also definitely the turn and how to score the improper turn for the walk and turn. And we've added some new videos, and so you'll see some new videos that are going to be coming out on a new DWI stop. The old nighttime stop that we used that has been there for a number of years, well, that is being replaced. And we're working on new dry lab workshop videos, which is something I think that is very important, is to try to update those as well.
And Chuck, I'm afraid we've run out of time. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to share?
In fact, there it is. It's my contact information right there, so perfect timing, I think. And so I welcome any input and any suggestions, because being on the curriculum committee, if there are SFST instructors in Montana or other people that maybe have some ideas or think that we need to clarify this or should be working in this area, there's my contact information.
That's fantastic, Chuck. Thank you. And if everybody would take note of Chuck's email down at the bottom, hayes@theiacp.org. That's a great way to get a hold of Chuck. He's very responsive to all of us. So I appreciate what you do to help us, Chuck. Also, you can get a hold of me at Aaron@inmantraining.com or Barb@inmantraining.com. We will both have copies of Chuck's presentation that we can share with you, and I can certainly let you know about Montana's nuances. And finally, I don't want to leave out Larry Adorni, who is L. Adorni, L-A-D-O-R-N-I @mt.gov, is our SFST coordinator for the state. So if you have specific questions for him, please feel free to send him an email. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. We do have one more webinar tomorrow for those of you who are interested in learning about telephonic warrants. We have a new case called Minute that came out in August that seems to have opened the door for us being able to get warrants in more DUI cases than we normally could have in the future. So if you join me tomorrow at noon, we'll talk about that case and its impacts, as well as just the traditional how to get a telephonic warrant in Montana. You can email Barb if you're interested in registering for that class. Thanks again, and everybody, for signing on. Thanks, Chuck, for joining us.
Thank you.
Look forward to everybody joining us again sometime in the future. Bye-bye.